Okay. Malcolm.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem, but you never see them going under the label of liberals. That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox.
Welcome to Pegasus versus the World, where we take on challenges, comedy, trending topics, and some travel.
City boy! City boy!
All right, you guys. So this is coming from the late great, that was the late great Malcolm X. But this is a video from Thomas Sowell. And I've been going, it's funny because there's some new things on this channel that I've really been gravitating to, and it's Thomas Sowell commentary, The Fat Electrician, The Poor Man's Podcast, and then these like nature channels. Like rugby's in there a little bit too, but the nature joints with like that eel shocking an alligator or whatever, a crocodile, and the honey badger. So I've been kind of like, I try to mix it up on this channel, and it allows me a little freedom because on my other channel, it's pretty much only music, but it's fun. This is like stuff that I enjoy going over. Now, this clip of Malcolm X talking about the white liberal, I've heard this clip before, but I'm interested to see how they put this together and what Thomas Sowell thinks of this. This clip has been making the rounds, especially since around 2019 and 2020, it was going crazy. This intro clip of Malcolm X is talking about the white liberal. So let's get into it. Hear it from Malcolm X himself. I'm actually a fan of Malcolm X. I love Martin Luther King too. They both have pros and cons. Why? Because they're human. They're men. And when I say men, I'm not saying, because they were a man. No, I'm just saying they're human men, right? They're not AI. They're not an alien species. They're human men, and we make mistakes from time to time. So it's just cool to go back and see what's popping. Anyways, if y'all want to check this out, this is on Thomas Sowell TV's channel, I believe. Also, if you want to support my channel, you can like, share, comment, subscribe. Also, I'll link in the description my other channels, Music Reaction Channel and Podcast. Podcast been going slower than I'd like, but we be putting content up there too. So, all right, let's get this. This is Malcolm X was right about the true enemies of black people in the United States. That's a wild title, now that I think about it.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem, but you never see them going under the label of liberals. That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to. But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling. And you take him for a friend.
That's wild. That's an amazing example. Now, I don't know where this is going to go. So I want to preface this because I try to be as fair, neutral, and balanced as I can in these reactions. I am a little biased. I kind of have my own I have my own ideologies, my own beliefs, my own opinions. But when I take in this info, I try to be as middle ground as possible. Now, what I do know for a fact, the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans, the whatevers and the whatevers, they do like to cherry pick sound bites and make their group look better or vice versa. This does happen. I'm not saying that just happened there. This is like a disclaimer before we get into this. Hey, let's just listen to it. Let's see how much sense it makes or doesn't make, and let's vibe. Anyways, this is an excerpt. This excerpt is taken from the book Black Rednecks and White Liberals. Let's go. That's a book by Thomas Sowell, I'm pretty sure.
Many of the prevailing misconceptions of the histories of both blacks and whites in America derive from trying to amalgamate morality and causation so as to make the moral evil of slavery a causal explanation of contemporary negative social phenomena, which have in fact had entirely different historical bases. The touchy pride of white Southerners, ready to explode into deadly violence, has often been explained as being a result of whites being used to unbridled domination over slaves. But the very same attitudes existed among their ancestors in Britain, where slavery did not exist, as those attitudes also existed in those parts of the South where slaves were virtually non-existent, and among people who are in no economic condition to buy slaves. When discussing both blacks and Southern whites, slavery has served as an all-purpose explanation of many social phenomena, ranging from broken families to poor education, lower labor force participation rates, and high rates of crime and violence. Often, evidence has been neither asked for nor given. Not surprisingly, many of these explanations do not stand up under scrutiny. Census data, for example.
All right, it sounds like we're about to get into it. Because essentially he's, explaining where we're at with things, with the way we explain and the causation of, some of the racial tension, the racial disparities, etc. And the explanation we've been given, he's implying that they're not looking at maybe, say, the data, or they're not looking at it in a more in-depth way. It's we're going to see where this goes. What's crazy, the thing that kind of not shocked me because I've seen this. I know what the civil rights movement was about. Civil rights was crazy, but just re-seeing that soldier with the bayonet on it is, bro, this country has been through some shit, man. It's been through some shit. That's why I be tripping out on the people this age still like running in the victim Olympics, because like our ancestors really face some real oppression, some real some real stuff. And they fought so hard to get us to this place where we're at right now, so you could get your bag and go get that milli wop, and you out here on the internet talking about food stamps and some bullshit, man. I mean, who am I? I'm not denigrating people who are in a less situation, but it is our mindset. And not everyone can be rich. That's the other thing too, man. Like when you start seeing America as a whole, like there's a class war going on, right? There's just a lot going on. Anyways, I don't want to deviate from this conceptual matter that he's bringing up. I just want sometimes I almost summarize these things for myself just to make sure I'm grasping the information properly. And then sometimes people in the comments will course correct, be like, yeah, man, you tripping on this one or so. Yeah. All right, let's go.
And evidence has been neither asked for nor given. Not surprisingly, many of these explanations do not stand up under scrutiny. Census data, for example, show that labor force participation rates were higher among non-whites than among whites in 1920 and 1930. No matter what the origin of counterproductive behavior, such behavior must be changed if progress is the goal. On the other hand, if the real agenda...
There's something there. There's something very key with him saying counterproductive behavior. Because even though I don't have all the answers yet, the one thing I noticed, if you guys don't know, like I was a lefty, left-leaning, liberal. Like we were going to protest. Like I thought I was an activist. I was touring with Immortal Technique. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then I started having some responsibilities. My business started working. I started having responsibilities. I started having these certain things. So like I can look back and assess. So when I say these things, I'm not necessarily talking about the culture. It's definitely not just about black culture, because this is a cultural issue among any ethnicity and race. And sometimes maybe it'll pop up in a specific ethnicity and race more than others. But there is a problematic way of thinking that I had. And when he says this counterproductive behavior, I'm like, there's a lot of, it actually strikes a vital nerve for me, because I'm like, I realized the mistakes I've made that could have, like the consequences for some of the things that I've done in my lifetime were very severe, and I got lucky. And so for me to get on a platform and talk about, yo, your mindset is everything and you got to course correct ASAP is just because that's what would serve people, right? That would serve them better that way than just running amok in the darkness. And you're going to end anyways.
No matter what the origin of counterproductive behavior, such behavior must be changed if progress is the goal. On the other hand, if the real agenda is to score points against American society, then blacks can be used as a means to that end. More generally, a pro-black stance by white intellectuals enhances the latter's moral standing and self-esteem, whether or not the particular manifestation of that stance helps or harms blacks on net balance. The chafing restrictions of civilization, which can at times become irksome to people of any color, may be vicariously thrown off by those white intellectuals who cheer on outlandish and even lawless behavior by black hoodlums or entertainers. Blacks, in effect, become the mascots of these intellectuals, symbolizing and acting out the latter's resistance to society.
Bro, that's kind of crazy. It is kind of weird when you champion certain things. For example, when I listen to rap music, and it could be black, Latin, white artists, it don't matter. But when people champion something because they look a certain way and they're like, oh, well, they came from this circumstance, so this is okay. And then you really dive into the music, and it's about murder, stealing, degradation, disrespect to the women. And I'm guilty of some of the just, you know, they say it's misogyny, but it's not, because misogyny is hatred for women, you know, and that's not why you might say something that's like not uplifting to women, but it's not because you hate them. Most male rappers actually love women, right? That's just the truth. But anyways, people will champion the stuff and be like, oh, he came from the mud. He came from the this, that. And the crazy thing is when I see grown men who have become millionaires and successful, and they're still championing that type of behavior, right? And we see it. I don't need to name any names, but you could just read the XXL or these hip hop publications, and you can see all the multimillionaire people, rappers specifically, going to jail in the latter part of their life for what, right? You know, they could be investing in land, real estate, a bunch of things, but there's still that street element. And it's also, I just think people champion bad behavior. They reward bad behavior on TikTok, on the internet, you know, in 2020 when people were, you know, rioting and looting. It's okay to have a protest, and it's okay to get a little crunk, right? But when people cross that line, and even if you want to say they crossed the line at J6, I'm cool with that. Like I keep it a buck on both facets. That's not the proper behavior. Now, J6 is hard to talk about because there were literally people placed in all of these protests and all these political endeavors, whether it be the BLM stuff or J6, right? There was legitimately people positioned in these to try to get emotional responses from people and to get people to do certain things. And typically they got the people to move in a certain direction. So it is interesting to see, but let's keep listening.
Or more accurately, civilization. But while mascots may be indulged, more fundamentally, mascots exist for the sake of those who adopt them, and the actual well-being of the mascot is seldom a high priority. By cheering on counterproductive attitudes, making excuses for self-defeating behavior, and promoting the belief that racism accounts for most of blacks' problems, white intellectuals serve their own psychic, ideological, and political interests. They are the kinds of friends who can do more harm than enemies. White intellectuals serve their own psychic, ideological, and political interests. They are the kinds of friends who can do more counts for most of a high priority. By cheering on counterproductive attitudes, making excuses for self-defeating behavior, and promoting the belief that racism accounts for most of blacks' problems, white intellectuals serve their own psychic, ideological, and political interests.
Again, the key stuff that pops out to me is when he said self-defeating behavior, right? Because let's say racism or oppression was personally holding you down, and then you take on these certain beliefs, you can't even counteract what's holding you down. You literally have to have a different type of thought process, a different type of mindset to get over that hump, right? Because think about civil rights. Like, let's think about what was done to black people in America. It was effed up. You know what I'm saying? And it was one of the places where I saw something, I think it was a Sowell video back in the day where he's talking about in Brazil after slavery, the slaves weren't treated like the slaves were treated in America. Like, American slaves got treated crazy after slavery ended, but not in Brazil. But he also mentioned the economical advantages American slaves got and eventually got in comparison to Brazil. So there's these nuanced conversations to be had, But yo, like what the biggest thing I'm taking from here is like counterproductive behavior and self-defeating behavior. And the reason I take this to heart, because that was me. I was in the streets, just hollering at chicks, getting shot at, shooting people, doing stuff that I should not have been doing. And really, I was in a 2-parent household. My parents were both solid parents. They're both Christian. I never saw anything that I did in my household. I literally kind of grew up to MTV and rap music. Now, I'm not totally blaming that. It was the influence of my friends. It was my own mind. It was this, that, the other. However, both my parents had to go into the workforce and work, allowing me to be raised by my friends, my influences, and stuff like that. And the thing that kept me out of jail and kept me from, having a lifetime prison sentence was the fundamentals they gave me. And, essentially I left that lifestyle, but I had to have a mindset shift. So self-defeating behavior, counterproductive behavior, that was me from probably like 17 till I was about 20, give or take, maybe 21. And then I started to make the course correction. It didn't come immediate, Anyways, this speaks to me just because I understand the impact of culture. People say, no, it's because you guys were held down and da-da-da-da-da, but that doesn't help me. Knowing the oppression, knowing we've been held down, that doesn't help me get to point B. I need to learn about finances. I needed to know about women, and how to date women and, build wealth and these things, So it's unique. It is unique because instead of, let's say, championing bad behaviors, we should just champion getting the people the information that they need to, change their life and reward that and, uplift that in society, have a bunch of TikTok videos about how you can, save money on your taxes or start a business or do all this stuff versus twerking, complaining about your food stamps getting taken away, etc.
They are the kinds of friends who can do more harm than enemies. A crucial fact about white liberals must be kept in mind. They are not simply in favor of blacks in general. Their solicitude is poured out for blacks as victims, blacks as welfare mothers, criminals, political activists against the larger society, as well as those blacks who serve as general countercultural symbols against the larger society. White liberals have nothing approaching the same interest in blacks as the principal victims of black criminals or as people advancing themselves within the existing framework of American society, including many who have risen within the military. Nor do they get particularly worked up over blacks who build up their own human capital or business capital. None of the many reports of black schools that excel academically seems to arouse any great interest among white liberals. It was not the liberals in Washington, but the Reagan administration, which offered successful black educator Marva Collins an appointment as Secretary of Education.
Damn, I didn't know that. Reagan did some sus things too. He did some good stuff as well. The main thing he did, he was the V word. You go, vrn, 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 if you know what I mean. He passed some wild legislation, which gives them impunity for things that could potentially happen if you get a V word. You connect the dots. But he did do some good stuff too. Anyways, at that end piece, I'm going to give a C student explanation here. I think you feed the things that grow the community, right? Like at the end, it's like we prop up, we reward, things that shouldn't, we can acknowledge, we can acknowledge oppression and we could acknowledge racism and point it out. When you see it, point it out. When you see it, point it out. I'm cool with that. But living under the guise like this is your identity is not good for you. It's not healthy for you, and it's not productive for you. And I was under that guise. I speak from someone who was like, I remember being in my teenage years really torn. I went to the movies, to Tinseltown, and saw some, slavery movie and, teared up a little bit during the movie. And I grew up on Roots, not knowing that it wasn't accurate in this. It was a depiction of what could have happened, but it wasn't like, I thought it was an absolute true story that linked to lineage and da-da-da-da. So, you know, my heart's broken as a kid, you know, in my teenage years, and I lived under that, you know, a lot of emotional triggers from like the N-word, you know, this, that, and it's just like, why? I grew up one day, I was like, I don't care what you think. I don't care if you're one of the dumb ones that want to say the N-word. That if it affects me at some level, let's address it, right? Like if there's some, like, you know, I'm over here trying to throw concerts and the venue owner is saying the N-word and he don't want to work with black promoters. I'm not saying that's happened, but I'm saying then I go work with a different promoter, or not a different promoter, a different venue, right? Different venue owner. That's the thing. In America, we have so many options. It's just so easy to get caught up in this way of thinking. That was the way I was caught up. I was like, oh man, I'll never make it because they don't want me to make it. Do you know how limiting that is? And it was hurtful for me. Like there was these limiting beliefs, scarcity beliefs. And, you know, it's also because I came from, I thought we were middle class until I discovered what middle class is. Middle class in Colorado Springs is Briargate. Yeah. Middle class is Briargate, you know. People making six figures or more, you know, a year. I always thought I was in a middle class family. I wasn't. I don't know if it was lower middle class or lower, but we lived on the south side, Widefield, you know. And both my parents had to work just so we could get by. We never had nothing lavish. Like all the stuff I've had lavish in my life have come from this part of my life. So, with that being said, I had a certain type of mindset growing up, from scarcity, limiting beliefs, self-defeating beliefs, counterproductive beliefs, right? I went into the workforce instead of working as hard as I can. I was like, F these MFers, F the man. I ain't working hard. I'm going to try to just get as much money for the least amount of work as I can do instead of developing skills, right? Luckily, I developed skills in putting music together, rhyming, being in front of a camera, and those skills flourished later in my life. But I was painting houses, I was doing construction, I was selling furniture, selling Cutco knives, selling credit cards as a telemarketer. I've done it all. But the limiting belief of just saying, oh, the man is trying to oppress me, everyone is out to get me, I didn't develop the best skill. Like I can sell kind of now because of all the years of doing certain things, but I could have been an ill salesman, which would even help me to this day, right? All these limiting beliefs and all these detractors, I think that's what they speak to here. I think there might be a little more nuance and complexity to it than even I'm embarking on, but I do think it's as simple as changing your mindset and not getting in your own way. And people are like, it's easy for you to say you had two parents, you had this, you had that. But I know people who had less than me and doing better than me. Some of those people, you know, mentor through YouTube, stuff like that. So I don't know, something to think about, something to talk about in the comments. You guys let me know what I got, what I missed, and I'll see y'all later.
City boy, city boy.